It was one of those peaceful evenings that draws you outside, the kind where everything just slows down for a while. The air was cool, carrying a quiet calm over the backyard as I sat back in one of our patio chairs, my mind drifting while I sipped a drink I'd snuck from the fridge. The soft bubbling of the hot tub on the deck was the only sound breaking the silence. It was unusual for the house to feel so empty and still. Usually, weekends were when my husband, Henry, and I filled the space with friends, neighbors, or family. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Amber, 34 years old, living in Grand Island, Nebraska. I'm married to Henry, who's a year older, and we've built a pretty comfortable life together over the 7 years we've been married. We live in a cozy home near the Oasis Island Water Park, a peaceful neighborhood with plenty of families, and for the most part, our days are stable and predictable. My days are mostly mine to spend as I like, some time at the gym, outings with friends, maybe a quiet lunch at a cafe. Meanwhile, Henry is usually off working hard at his business, an electronic cigarette company he's poured his heart into. Henry's family, on the other hand, is a little different. They live in Rapid City, South Dakota, and are all well off and busy with their own careers. They're all close in their way, but family gatherings aren't their style. They tend to prefer vacations in exotic places or weekends at luxury resorts over big reunions. I'm on good terms with all of them, but we're not particularly close. But if there's one exception, it's Henry's identical twin brother, Tyler. Tyler is a professional soccer player, the adventurous one in the family, with a busy life full of traveling, parties, and friends all over the place. Although Henry and Tyler lead completely different lives, they share a strong bond, one that I could never fully understand but admired all the same. One Saturday, as Henry and I were settling into a rare quiet weekend together, he received a text from Tyler. "Hey bro, game's close by, so I'm coming into town. Thought I'd swing by for a visit." I saw Henry's face light up as he read the message. Though their lives had taken them in opposite directions, he and Tyler shared a unique closeness, a kind of twin connection that time and distance didn't seem to affect. I could see how excited Henry was about the visit, and the thought of Tyler coming over felt like a nice change of pace. "Why don't we throw together a little barbecue, just the three of us?" Henry suggested, already buzzing with enthusiasm. "Sounds perfect," I replied, and we set to work. It felt good to have something to look forward to, something a little different from our usual quiet weekends. We spent the next hour preparing, setting out drinks, organizing the backyard, and getting everything ready for a casual evening with family. By early afternoon, everything was ready. The smell of barbecue sauce lingered in the air, mingling with the late summer breeze, and the sound of upbeat music played softly from the speakers on the deck. Just as we were adding the finishing touches, we heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Henry practically jogged to the door, grinning as he went to greet his brother. It had been nearly 2 years since Tyler had last come by, and I watched from a distance as they exchanged a hearty hug, the kind only shared by people who've known each other their entire lives. It was as if no time had passed at all, as if the years and miles between them disappeared the moment they met. Then Tyler turned, flashing me that familiar, easygoing smile of his. "Amber, it's been too long," he said warmly, giving me a hug as well. "You look fantastic. Married life is treating you well, I see." I laughed, feeling slightly flustered. Tyler had always been charming, with a charisma that seemed to fill the room wherever he went. He had the same bright blue eyes as Henry, the same unruly dark hair, and even the same laugh. But while Henry's style was more laid-back and businesslike, Tyler's confidence and easy charm always made him stand out. He had a certain glow about him, something magnetic that was impossible to ignore. As we all settled in, Tyler started catching us up on his life. He'd just gotten back from a game in Denver, and he told us stories about his teammates, the cities he'd visited, and the people he'd met along the way. Listening to him felt like being whisked away on an adventure, as though we were all right there with him, soaking up the thrill of it all. Henry fired up the grill, tossing a few steaks and vegetables over the flames, and the three of us sat back, beers in hand, enjoying the warm afternoon sun. The laughter was contagious, and every so often, the brothers would start on a story from their younger days, each one crazier than the last. I was content just to watch them, seeing Henry more relaxed than he had been in weeks, laughing like he didn't have a single worry in the world. Tyler brought out a side of Henry the first rarely saw, an easy, carefree side that seemed to belong to a version of him I'd never fully known. After a while, Tyler glanced my way, his expression shifting to one of genuine curiosity. "So, Amber," he asked, raising an eyebrow, "what about you? What's new on your end?" I smiled, taking a sip of my drink before answering. "Oh, just the usual," I said lightly. "Workouts, catching up with friends, a lot of gym time to keep myself entertained while Henry's working. Nothing too exciting." Tyler tilted his head, watching me closely. "You ever think about starting a family?" he asked, his tone friendly but direct. "It's just you two seem so settled." I glanced at Henry, who smiled faintly. "Well, we've talked about it here and there," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "But it just hasn't seemed like the right time. Henry's schedule is so busy, and it feels like it would be a little overwhelming to do it all on my own." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense," he said, his expression understanding. "Timing is everything." For a moment, there was a flicker of something between us, a mutual understanding, a connection that went unspoken but felt strangely significant. Then, just as quickly, it passed, and we all went back to laughing and talking, letting the afternoon drift along with the soft rhythm of our conversation. As the hours slipped by, I found myself settling deeper into the easy comfort of the evening, savoring the warmth of the sun and the rare simplicity of it all. It was the kind of day that felt effortless, like nothing could break the peace that had settled over us. But little did I know, that peace was about to shift in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The afternoon wore on, and soon the warm light of the setting sun bathed the backyard in a soft golden glow. Henry and Tyler continued swapping stories, their laughter filling the air with a carefree energy that felt almost nostalgic. I loved seeing them like this, so connected, so in sync, as if they were two parts of the same soul. The bond between them was something rare and enviable, a twin connection that was both deep and unbreakable. At some point, the conversation drifted into stories about their high school and college days. Tyler, with his usual charisma, started recounting the many ways he and Henry used to confuse people by switching places. "Remember that time with Anne?" Tyler said, nudging Henry with a mischievous grin. "She had no idea which of us was which half the time." Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, man, don't remind me. She thought we were two sides of the same person." Their laughter caught my attention, and I couldn't help but smile at the memory they were sharing. But then Tyler said something that made me pause. "Man, we practically shared her without even trying," Tyler said, letting out a laugh that felt almost too casual. I blinked, caught off guard. "Shared her?" I realized they were referring to the fact that Anne, one of Henry's ex-girlfriends, had briefly dated both of them, without ever knowing the full truth. My curiosity flared, and I suddenly found myself paying closer attention, wondering what else I didn't know about Henry's past. Henry must have sensed my surprise because he glanced my way, a hint of embarrassment in his smile. "It was a long time ago, Amber," he said, as if trying to reassure me. "We were just kids, messing around." I nodded, trying to hide my intrigue, but the idea that Henry had once been more adventurous than I'd imagined lingered in my mind. I'd always known him as steady, reliable, and practical, qualities I loved about him. But this new glimpse into his past hinted at a different side, one I hadn't expected. Tyler noticed my interest and raised an eyebrow. "What, surprised?" he asked, flashing a playful grin. "I guess we don't come off as the wild type anymore." "I guess I am a little surprised," I admitted, trying to keep my tone light. "I didn't think you two were so close in that way." Henry shrugged, his expression a mix of nostalgia and feigned embarrassment. "Well, those were wild times," he said, glancing at Tyler with a smirk. "Things have settled down a lot since then." As I watched them exchange a knowing look, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their shared history, a history that only they fully understood, one that was layered with memories, secrets, and a bond that had been forged long before I entered the picture. For a moment, a thought crossed my mind. Henry and Tyler had shared parts of themselves with each other in ways I would never fully understand. And somehow, that realization left me feeling both curious and strangely intrigued. The afternoon slowly drifted into evening, and the comfortable warmth between us was matched by the dimming light. As I took in the sight of Henry and Tyler laughing together, I realized how rare it was for them to be able to relax like this. No work pressures, no worries, just a quiet night of brotherly connection. Part of me felt grateful to be included in this moment of theirs, even if I was a spectator to memories that belonged to their past. After a while, I excused myself to head inside and freshen up. As I stood in the cool, quiet kitchen, I could still hear their laughter through the open window. I lingered by the counter, letting the sounds of their conversation wash over me. It was fascinating to listen to the stories they shared, the hints of mischief, the half-whispered tales of past girlfriends and college escapades. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but then Tyler's voice lowered, and I heard him ask Henry something that caught my attention. "So, you think Amber would ever go for something a little less conventional?" There was a pause, and my breath caught as I waited for Henry's response. His voice came through, quieter than usual, with a tone that held a trace of hesitation. "I don't know, Ty," he replied, sounding unsure. "She's traditional. I've thought about bringing it up, but I just assumed it wasn't her thing." I leaned against the counter, processing what I'd just heard. The word traditional hung in the air, and it struck me how much Henry had unknowingly boxed me into that role. To him, I was his steady, reliable partner, the same way I saw him. But the truth was, I'd kept parts of myself hidden, desires I'd never shared because I thought he wouldn't understand. I took a steadying breath, a mix of excitement and curiosity building within me. Maybe it was the atmosphere of the evening, or maybe it was something deeper, but I felt a quiet thrill at the idea of showing Henry a different side of me. I'd always thought of him as the sensible one, and maybe he saw me the same way. But that assumption was starting to feel like a wall we'd both silently built around ourselves.
It was time to change that.
With a newfound sense of confidence, I straightened up and walked back outside, making sure my footsteps were noticeable so they'd hear me coming. Henry and Tyler looked up as I approached, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Henry's eyes. Tyler, on the other hand, gave me an amused smile, as if he knew exactly what I might have overheard. "You two seem deep in conversation," I said, settling back into my chair with a slight smile. Henry tried to brush it off, a bit flustered. "Oh, just talking about old times." I looked between the two of them, then let my gaze settle on Henry. "It's funny, I could have sworn I heard you talking about me." The silence was immediate. Tyler raised an eyebrow, looking at Henry with a smirk that seemed to say, "Well, she's on to us." Henry cleared his throat, glancing away as he tried to formulate a response. "We were just reminiscing. Nothing important." I smiled, keeping my tone light but steady. If it was nothing, then why not tell me? I looked at Henry, curious to see how he'd handle this. "It's clear there are things we haven't talked about." Henry hesitated, and for a second, it seemed as though he might deny it. But then, something shifted in his expression, as if he was tired of pretending. "All right," he said, his voice softer. "Tyler and I were talking about some memories from before we met. But it got me thinking, Amber. We've always played it safe, haven't we? Maybe I never gave you enough credit." He looked at me with a new openness, his eyes searching mine for understanding. "Well," I replied, letting the words hang in the air, "maybe you should have asked." Henry looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and surprise, as if he were seeing me in a new light. I could feel the weight of my words lingering between us, and for a moment, none of us said a thing. Tyler watched quietly, the usual playfulness in his gaze replaced by something more thoughtful, almost as if he understood exactly what was unfolding and wanted to give us space. I glanced at Tyler, then back at Henry, taking a steadying breath. "If you've had things you wanted to talk about, or try, why not share them with me?" I asked softly. "We've been together for 7 years, Henry. We shouldn't have to guess what the other wants." Henry seemed to let my words sink in, nodding slowly. "You're right," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I've always been afraid that I'd mess things up, that I'd bring something up and ruin what we have. You're everything to me, Amber, and I didn't want to take any chances." I felt a warmth spread through me at his words, appreciating his honesty, but part of me was frustrated that he'd held himself back all this time. Maybe we'd both been afraid of taking risks in our relationship, of stepping outside the familiar roles we'd cast each other in. Tyler cleared his throat gently, breaking the tension just enough to lighten the moment. "Well, I'll be honest," he said, glancing between us. "I've seen how happy you two make each other. I don't think either of you has anything to worry about." I smiled, thankful for his easy presence. Tyler's confidence and openness had always been refreshing, and seeing him with Henry made me realize just how different they were, and yet how similar in their loyalty to each other and to the people they loved. Henry took a deep breath, seeming to make a decision as he reached over and took my hand. "Amber," he began slowly, "I think we've both been wanting the same thing but just didn't know how to say it." A thrill of excitement ran through me as his words settled in. He was opening up, taking a step toward me in a way he hadn't before. For the first time, we weren't just husband and wife sitting on our patio, having a quiet night. We were partners, each bringing a new side of ourselves into the light, ready to explore the unknown. I glanced at Tyler, catching his eye and feeling a mutual understanding pass between us. He had been there, listening, but also allowing us the space to be real with each other. The energy in the air shifted, becoming something charged and vibrant, a sense of possibility that felt both thrilling and comforting. "Why don't we stop pretending?" I said softly, giving Henry's hand a gentle squeeze. "Let's just let ourselves be open." Henry smiled, nodding, and I saw a sense of relief wash over him. Tyler leaned back, his expression calm yet encouraging, as if he'd been waiting for us to reach this moment. We spent the next few minutes letting go of all the assumptions, the unspoken boundaries, and just enjoying each other's company. There was laughter, shared glances, and a closeness I hadn't felt in years. It was as if we'd let down walls that had been there without us even realizing it. The night drifted on, but I knew this was a turning point, one that would reshape not just our marriage but also how we understood and trusted each other. As the hours slipped by, the three of us continued to talk, letting the conversation flow freely, deeper than it ever had before. Tyler shared stories from his travels, his laughter and energy filling the backyard with a warmth that felt comforting yet electric. Henry and I listened, and I noticed how my husband seemed more relaxed than ever, as if the weight of unspoken words had finally lifted. At one point, Tyler's gaze shifted to me, his eyes holding a kind of curiosity I hadn't seen before. "You know, Amber," he began thoughtfully, "I've always admired how you and Henry work together as a team. It's rare, really. There's a kind of understanding between you that's hard to come by." I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest.
"Thank you, Tyler."
"That means a lot coming from you." He nodded, his expression serious. "Not everyone can do that. To be honest with each other, to let themselves be vulnerable, it takes courage." He glanced at Henry, and they shared a look that spoke volumes. Henry gave a small, appreciative nod. "We've always had each other's backs, Ty. You know that better than anyone." I watched them, feeling the depth of their bond and, strangely, feeling more connected to it than I ever had before. Tyler's presence, his understanding, added a new dimension to what I shared with Henry, as if he were a bridge between us, encouraging us both to see each other clearly. Finally, as the evening deepened, I noticed Tyler glance at his watch. He sighed, stretching as if debating whether to leave or stay. "Time flies when you're with good company," he said, smiling at us both. "But I should probably head back. Early day tomorrow." Henry looked at him, a hint of reluctance in his eyes. "Stay a bit longer, Ty. It's not every day we get a night like this." Tyler hesitated, and I found myself nodding, encouraging him to stay. "It's true," I added softly. "We rarely get to spend time like this. Besides, I think there's more we all have to talk about." Tyler looked at us both, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "Well, if you both insist," he said, settling back into his seat with a smile that hinted at something unspoken. The conversation took on a new rhythm, softer and more reflective. We each shared things we hadn't before, revealing parts of ourselves usually kept private. I shared my dreams for the future. Henry spoke about the things that had always held him back, and Tyler listened, contributing with his own stories of self-discovery. The moment stretched, taking on a significance that felt both intimate and powerful. Henry reached over, gently taking my hand, his gaze steady and open. "Amber," he said softly, "thank you for letting us have this tonight. For being here, for listening, for being open." I squeezed his hand, a smile tugging at my lips. "I'm glad I did," I replied, my voice filled with sincerity. I didn't realize how much I needed this too. The silence that followed felt comforting, as though we'd all arrived at a place of quiet understanding. This night, in its unexpected intimacy, had changed things between us. I felt closer to Henry, but in a way that also embraced the connection he shared with his brother, a connection that I now understood ran deeper than I'd ever known. As midnight approached, the backyard was bathed in the soft glow of the patio lights, casting warm shadows over the three of us. The conversation slowed, settling into comfortable silences punctuated by shared glances and quiet smiles. I felt a sense of unity between us, a closeness that went beyond words, something profound that had formed through our openness that night. Tyler leaned back in his chair, looking up at the stars with a contented sigh. "You know," he murmured, "nights like these are rare. They remind you what really matters." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I didn't realize how much I needed this." He glanced at me, his eyes holding a new depth, as if he were seeing me for the first time. I could feel the warmth of his hand on mine, grounding me, and I gave him a small smile that I hoped conveyed everything I was feeling: gratitude, love, and an unexpected excitement for the future. As the night wore on, I found myself surprised by the ease of our closeness, by how natural it felt to let Tyler into the space that was usually reserved for just Henry and me. There was something liberating in sharing this moment as a trio, each of us finding new perspectives and discovering parts of ourselves in the process. After a while, Tyler glanced down at his empty glass and then at Henry, a grin tugging at his lips. "You know, I don't think I've had a night like this since. I can't even remember," he said, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "It's almost like being back in college, just the three of us enjoying the moment." Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, but now we've got a bit more life experience and a lot more to lose," he added with a smile. The light-hearted banter gave way to another shared silence, and I took a moment to absorb the night, realizing how much it had shifted my perspective. I could see the unbreakable bond between Henry and Tyler, and it was clear that my relationship with Henry was only strengthened by understanding that connection better. When it was finally time for Tyler to leave, he hugged us both, holding Henry a little longer than usual. "You two take care of each other," he said, his voice soft. "And thanks for tonight. It meant more than you know." After he left, Henry and I sat together in the quiet, letting the night wrap around us like a blanket. The weight of the evening was settling in, leaving us with a sense of peace. Henry turned to me, his eyes gentle. "Amber," he said, his voice filled with gratitude, "I didn't know we could be this close. Thank you for tonight." I rested my head on his shoulder, smiling. "Me neither. But I'm glad we did this. It feels right." We sat like that, wrapped in a newfound sense of unity, as if this evening had unlocked something we'd both been searching for. It was a night that would stay with us, a memory that would carry us through the days ahead.